Today I want to show you how to investigate the door lock issue on your GE 2-in-1 Ultrafast Combo washer and also how to replace that door lock if needed. If the door on your machine won't lock, you could get a red or yellow error on the front of the washing machine, or it could say that it's merely open when it really isn't, indicating some manner of door lock failure. The first thing I would look at before you even take apart the machine would be the diagnostic codes on the washing machine. I have a video that I will link in the description to show you what codes could be coming up involving the door lock. In that video, you'll find about 5 or 6 codes that will help you directly identify where the failure is in the system, but in most cases, it's probably going to involve the door wire harness, the door lock itself, or the striker and door lock mechanism. First, let's get some simple things out of the way. First, open the door and look at the striker. Is there any damage on the door lock or striker system? You'll find that it can move slightly in position even when the screws are tight. Make sure it can move freely as needed and there are no other obstructions. Next, look at the door lock mechanism on the unit itself. Are there any obstructions in the locking mechanism itself that could cause an issue? Also, is the small round button intact and able to be pressed in without any issues? If there's any damage or obstruction to this mechanism, you could be able to clean it out and then maybe able to solve the problem right here and now. But in most cases, you're likely to have had some sort of actual door lock failure based on the codes, so I want to show you how to get in and replace the door lock as needed. To access the door lock system, you're going to need the following because we're going to take the machine apart: a Phillips head screwdriver, a pair of pliers, a multimeter to test the door lock assembly, a small flat-bladed screwdriver, and then either a door boot spring tool or a wrench and cable ties or some other way to get that nasty spring back on. Finally, make sure you have an organizer of some manner to sort screws based on where they came from in the machine, as there are quite a few. First, make sure that the washing machine is not on and unplug it from the wall. To begin, we need to remove the detergent and fabric softener dispensers from the machine. To remove the dispensers, pull them each individually all the way out as far as they're going to go until you can't anymore. Then press the tab down at the rear of each of these dispensers and pull them out. Next, once the dispensers are out, locate the following 5 screw holes. Each one is pretty deep inside and you need to use a Phillips head screwdriver to remove each of these screws. On this particular unit that I'm dealing with today, removing the top 4 screws was pretty easy using a drill gun and a magnetic bit, which made it quite a bit easier due to the recessed nature of these holes. But on the last screw in the lower left corner, I had to use a screwdriver with a much thicker point, as it seems that it may require a thicker Phillips head drill bit, which kind of threw me off. Next, with all the screws out, go ahead and pull the filter out as far as it will go, then press the tab on the left side of the filter as shown, and then pull the entire filter housing assembly out. With that done, you can now take the console and pull forward on the front left side of the washer where the dispensers were, then pull up on it, and the assembly should fully detach from the front of the washing machine. Now, when you pull the console forward, note that there's going to be a huge cluster of wires hiding behind the interface panel. Make sure to have a glove or ESD bracelet on when you start to remove any of the wire harnesses. Now, from your point of view, these are the wires that you're going to see on the panel. Depending on what you want to do, the wires you need to remove may vary. To remove the interface from the rest of the machine, these are the 4 wires in black that are highlighted that you need to remove, and then depending on the situation, you may want to remove the one in red, but usually I suggest against it in most cases. Make sure to be very delicate with the wires as you remove them. Also note the push mount wire ties on the interface. Depending on your needs, you're probably going to have to use a wire cutter to remove some or most of these that are either inside the console itself or on the washing machine heat shield as well. Just be very careful not to damage these wires. When you use the wire cutters, remove only the plastic cable ties themselves. Here's another point of view on where most of the cable ties are that you may have to look at removing depending on what you're going to do. Next, separate the harness from the door light system here by pressing in the clip and then removing it. Then on the right side of the metal heat shield, you're going to find this hole with a wire that's going into it that should be blue and black. This is the blower thermistor. It's absolutely critical that you don't try to pull this out with your fingers by the wires or the harness itself, as you may break and destroy the harness in the attempt to do that. Instead, you want to take a pair of needle nose pliers, insert them into the thermistor housing, clamp down on the sides of the thermistor, and then remove it from the rubber housing that it's located in. When you have all the wires properly removed, you should be able to remove the entire console now fully from the machine. For the next part of this process, go ahead and start by opening the door of the unit. Then take a thin screwdriver and find the retainer wire on the washer gasket. It will be hiding behind the folds of the blue rubber here. Once you find it, press under the wire with the screwdriver and then pry it out of place. Once it's dislodged, carefully remove the wire from around the gasket. Then begin to carefully separate the gasket from around the front lip of the washing machine. The edges of the door could be a little bit sharp, so make sure to be careful and wear gloves. Now take a Phillips head screwdriver and remove the 2 screws from the plastic door lock cover. Once you have the 2 screws out, pull the cover off to reveal what's behind the covers, more screws. There are now 2 more screws holding the actual door lock in place. Go ahead and take the Phillips head screwdriver and remove these 2 screws. Once these 2 screws are out, you can go in where the washer gasket has been removed on this right side and then lift up on the door lock to remove it from the housing. In some cases, you can then proceed to remove the door lock right here if you need to replace it or work with it. However, the wire harness on this particular washing machine was very difficult to work with, and I wanted to go ahead and remove the front of the washing machine before doing any more work. Alternatively, at this juncture, you can investigate the door lock harness from here, if it was dislodged or any components on the harness itself that could have been damaged or misplaced. Something to note with the door lock assembly out is the small plastic piece. This is the door locking mechanism. If it's pressed in and will pop out, it means that the door is locked. If it's pressed in fully, it means that the door should be unlocked, or at least the electrical signal is that the door is unlocked. Potentially, if there's any issues with this piece, it could have gotten stuck, which you may be able to solve by pressing it in. But if by some reason you can't get the door lock off at this point, like I couldn't, let me show you how to take the door off entirely to give you more room, just to be safe. Now let's finish to remove the front of the GE unit. There are 3 screws under the unit, as you see here. Removing these screws could be quite difficult depending on your setup. In my case, I had to tilt the machine backward and wedge something under the legs to give a little bit of additional room. Once I have the bottom lifted up just a little bit, you can use a Phillips head screwdriver then to remove the 3 screws from the bottom of the washing machine. Next, use a pair of pliers to remove the dispenser hose clamp. Once it's pulled back, go ahead and remove the tube. Note that this hose could leak some water once you remove it. Now, there are 6 screws that need removed from the top of the washing machine front. The 6th screw on the far right side for reference is a bit different and wider, so please note that when you reinstall them. Go ahead and use your screwdriver or a drill gun with the Phillips bit to remove these 6 screws as needed. Now, with all the 13 different screws removed from the front of this unit, go ahead and remove the door by lifting up on the washer chassis, then away from the unit. Note that I did have to make sure that the items that I'd put underneath to wedge it to lift it up had to be moved further towards the rear of the machine so they would not catch on the front of the washer when I lifted up and out on the front. With the washer front now fully removed, you have access to all the additional systems inside the washing machine, such as the rest of the door gasket seal, the door lock, the drain pump, the front dampening system, and then finally the inverter motor control board, among other things. With the door lock off, in my case, it was much easier to fully inspect, then remove the door lock. Also, at this point, it may be worth inspecting the wire harness as well as the wires going into the washer chassis too. With the door lock off, separated from the machine, you can test it with a multimeter, or you could even test it with it still being on the wires theoretically. To test the door lock, you want to take the multimeter and set it to ohms resistance. The lock itself should return the OL symbol with the leads against any prong if the door striker is not inserted into the door lock. When you insert the door striker, you still are not going to get any signal from the multimeter no matter what you test it with from pin 1 to pin 2 or from 2 to 3. But if you press the door lock button down like what you're seeing here on the video, you should get a reading of about 118 to 127 ohms between pins 2 and 3. After this, the next step is to test the pins while pressing the door closing button as you see here. When the door is supposed to be locked and then you depress the button, you should be getting roughly 125 ohms of resistance, again give or take about 10 ohms, on the multimeter between pins 1 and 2 and then pins 2 and 3. If you fail to get any resistance, then the door lock is bad and you need to replace it. So again, you need to have the black shaft out like the door is locked, and then press in on the switch to see if you get a reading. If you get a reading between all of the pins, technically the door lock should be good. If you don't, again, it's bad. If you need to replace the door lock, please check the description for a link to the best deal on the door lock that I know of. If you buy it using the links through the channel, it does help me make more appliance videos to help you and other people out. Next, let's go ahead and reinstall the door lock and then the front of the washer if you did in fact have to take the whole door assembly off too. First, let's go ahead and put the door lock back into place on the harness. It should be able to insert only one way, and you can confirm that based on the small pegs on the harness versus the pegs on the door lock itself. Now we want to go ahead and reinstall the door to the washing machine. And before you do this, note the plastic pegs on the chassis of the washer, 4 in all. When you install the washing machine door, it will need to lift up and then rest on these and then will slot down into place. When putting the door back on, again, make sure that the door lock and gasket are placed properly so they don't get pinched anywhere when you seat the door onto the front of the washing machine. Also make sure no wires from the interface get caught when the door is reinstalled either, because I may have goofed up on that in the process of this. Then bring the door to the washing machine chassis, lift up and simply rest the door front onto the area where the pegs are. If done properly, the washing machine front will slide down into place on the pegs, locking themselves at the rear of those peg assemblies. Once done, roll the washing machine door gasket onto the door and continue to work around the door of the washing machine to the chassis, making sure that everything's situated on the pegs. I did have to lift the door into place a few times just to make sure it was fully seated, but this really wasn't too hard. When the washing machine's properly seated, there's not going to be any notable gap between the front of the washing machine door and the sides of the chassis as you see here in the video. There's almost no gap. On the bottom, you do have to ensure that the front of the washing machine was seated near or on these 3 metal fingers. I did not have any issues with lining these up because of those plastic pegs we keep talking about, but you just want to make sure that you pay attention to these during the installation if in case those got bent during disassembly. Now, let's go ahead and install the 6 screws at the top of the washing machine bulkhead to the chassis of the machine. Note that the last screw on the far right is a large wide-headed screw that goes into place. This is important because it helps lock the interface into place when we reinstall that in a little bit. You'll also then need to install the 3 screws at the bottom of the machine. Remember that you may need a gap underneath the washing machine, so make sure that you have it lifted up. Tilt the machine back if you need to install something underneath during this process. Once you have that done, go ahead and drop the machine on the floor, and you can now reach in to seat the door lock into the front of the door. Make sure that the small plastic catch on the door lock rests on the metal of the door like you see here in the video is circled. Then go ahead and seat the rubber hose onto the barb located here on the door. Use a pair of needle nose pliers to seat the hose clamp into place like you see. Now let's go back to the washing machine door gasket. You need to make sure that all the folds of the gasket are seated behind the metal lip of the door. This is kind of hard to show on camera, but it should be easy for you to see in person. Carefully work the gasket around the door. Typically, you want to use some dish soap behind the gasket to lube it up to make it easier for the gasket to seat into place. Once you have the full door gasket seated into place, reinstall the door retaining spring. This gasket's a little bit weird on the GEs because the typical hose spring tools won't work on this model, and I've had issues with some of the other GE Ultrafresh gaskets. The higher priced retaining tools will work, but the cheaper ones won't because of how small these springs are. I've done videos in the past showing you how to use a wrench and cable ties on how to install the spring clamp to the door. And I'll have a link to that video at the end of this. But I'll be honest, given how nice the washer is, I wasn't able to actually use this trick to get it to seat. Instead, what I did was I used some heavy-duty clamps to press down and hold the spring into place on one side, while I used a screwdriver to slowly bend the spring and wire retainer back into place. Essentially what I did to take it off in the first place in reverse. I did use 2 screwdrivers, which I am only showing the one on camera. With the spring back into place, go ahead and install the 2 screws to the door lock with a Phillips head screwdriver. Make sure that you use the right screws, as the door lock screws are different than the plate screws. With the door lock in place, go ahead and reinstall the larger, thicker, finer thread screws into the door lock plate. Once you have those 4 screws into that whole assembly done, you now have the door essentially fully in place now. It's time to go ahead and reinsert all the wires into the interface to get the last pieces of the machine reinstalled. If you have gloves, make sure to use them. You should have approximately 4 wire harnesses to install here: the NTC wire, the dispenser wire, the door light wire, and then the main control power wire. And you do have to route a lot of these through the zip ties or push mount ties, depending on what you've chosen when you installed the heat shield. Here's the pictures of the wires that I had to reinstall into the interface and how they go. I just wanted to take some pictures when I was reinstalling this to use them as a guiding principle when I put the interface back together. Finally, depending on what you did with the blower thermistor, you may have to reinsert the entire assembly or just the wire into place, depending on if you took the whole unit out, and I did take the entire assembly out. This is how I have my system routed, with the lack of the push mount cable ties, as again I had to buy a bunch after this video was done to try to find the right ones that would actually fit. Finally, roll the panel up into the heat shield and lock it into place. Mine set and locked into place very easily, but the key here to get it installed is that the interface needs to thread onto the 2 large wide screws on the right side, and the interface should lock into place. You may have to push it in and then pull it to the left side to get it to snap into place, or even use an angle depending on the situation, but I was able to just press it in as you see. The last screws then to install on this machine before we have it back together are the 5 screws here in the interface. Note that the 1 screw on the machine was different in the lower left corner, as it had a finer thread count. Also note that the dispenser likes to push rearward when you install these 5 screws. I had to make sure I kept pulling the dispenser forward into the interface to make sure that the screws reinstalled properly. Once you have all 5 screws into the dispenser and interface securely, you just have to insert the dispensers into place. Know that the bottom smaller dispenser has a groove at the bottom of the housing that needs matched up for it to insert properly into the housing. And that is everything. If you did it all the right way, you're ready to start the machine again after whatever you had to do to the heat pump. Now, if this did not solve your issue, there's a small possibility that a wire is disconnected on the main board. To access that, I would go ahead and check out my GE heat pump video for more info. I hope that this video did help you resolve the issue with your door lock not working. If not, I will have more videos on this machine in the future for related problems with other more in-depth repairs, and I hope you have a great day.